Military coups, armed conflict, food insecurity. Something has been stirring in the Sahel, and it has a lot to do with this. So, let me break it down for you. These three former French colonies have undergone a major policy shift in the last few years. Niger, Burkina Faso, and Mali have all seen military coups. Late Malian President Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta was ousted in a 2020 coup following months of political upheaval. Less than a year later, Colonel Assimi Goïta, who was a transitional vice president at the time, overthrew the government in another coup. Public opinion started swelling against France, and in 2022, French troops began withdrawing from Mali. At the turn of 2022, in Burkina Faso, soldiers booted President Roch-Marc Christian Kaboré from office. They inaugurated a military figure as leader in February, before his ouster 7 months later. By who? None other than Captain Ibrahim Traoré, who has been since racking up popular support among citizens. Public sentiment in Burkina Faso had also been turning against the French. In 2023, Burkina Faso began booting French troops out of their country. Niger is the latest country to have been hit by a coup, when President Mohamed Bazoum was detained. General Abdourahmane Tiani, who was commander of the Presidential Guard at the time, then appointed himself head of the Niger's new military government. Niger followed in Burkina Faso's shoes, kicking out French troops in December 2023. Now, all these coups help complicate and destabilize the security situation in a region that has been plagued by a number of militia groups. This is a graphic by the Financial Times showing attacks that have hit the Sahel region from 2012 to 2024. In the last 4 years, they have grown in an alarming frequency. From groups like Al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb, JNIM, and the Islamic State in the Greater Sahara. Many militia groups in the region have aligned themselves with bigger groups like ISIS and Al-Qaeda. Western African countries have been fighting militancy with a lot of help from either UN peacekeepers or former colonial masters, France. And whether you side with France or not, their pullout left a void. So did the late 2023 pullout of UN peacekeepers in Mali. This vacuum has been, with open arms, filled by Wagner and by extension Russia, to help these states battle the militant groups. Paramilitary group Wagner's late chief, Yevgeny Prigozhin, in fact cheered on Mali's coup and offered his services to the putschists. In August 2023, Prigozhin died in a suspicious helicopter crash after splitting with the Russian leadership and marching on Moscow. Wagner in Africa, now under Kremlin's command, rebranded in late 2023 to call themselves Africa Corps, and has been forming closer ties with West African countries. But groups like Wagner bring their own specter of violence. Take Mali, where 67% of Wagner's attacks targeted civilians. This is followed by JNIM, with whom 20% of Wagner's interactions are with, and 5% with IS Sahel. Other Sahel countries, like Burkina Faso, which, although not really affected by France's pullout, began recruiting volunteers to join the fight against militias, some of whom would end up joining them. Basically, an armed population defending themselves. Experts say this can only lead to more violence and a spiraling situation. Adding to that, since their coups, Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso have withdrawn from the regional group ECOWAS and set up their own bloc, Alliance of Sahel States. In response, France-friendly ECOWAS imposed a bunch of sanctions, including border closures and freezing state assets. Late February 2024, ECOWAS lifted those sanctions on humanitarian grounds, but experts say it may be too late. Apart from that, finding and maintaining stability in the putschist-ruled states in West Africa are on shaky ground. That's because the nature of their rule is inherently weak, and not just for the reasons you think. Violence from Islamic fundamentalist groups led to, as one analyst put it, the aggrandizement of military forces. Emboldened, they take power in form of coups with public support. But experts say this cannot end well because they lack the military discipline and willpower to see through their promises. So, with all these myriad groups with competing motives, from state armies to ISIS to Wagner to armed civilian groups, is the implosion of the Sahel a really distant possibility? What will happen if it did? Fighting between those groups has already displaced millions, closed borders, and disrupted agriculture and food supplies, triggering shortages. Now, 3.3 million Nigerians are facing acute food insecurity, and more than 43,000 people in Burkina Faso and Mali are facing catastrophic levels of hunger. Not only that, the the region is already set to face a demographic boom in the coming decades that could exacerbate its political and security vulnerabilities, as well as food shortages. Some say it would threaten an already flimsy regional stability. But what about global stability? As FD says, West Africa's coastal states are a gateway to the Sahel, but also vital for European shipping routes and have attracted international investment. It warns that if violence is left unchecked, it could spread south, but also north, in the direction of Europe. Prolonged and worsening instability in the region could trigger a fresh wave of refugees. The region is also a transit hub for migrants, so further violence could push them to take more dangerous routes. Niger, Burkina Faso, and Mali are also major gold producers. In the event of a collapse, it could set off a wrestle for control of artisanal mines. So, there's a lot at stake if the Sahel spirals. An event today could set the stage for what happens in 5 years. With so many competing influences and motives, only time will tell what's in the store for the embattled region.